Alright, so now we are live. Let me first introduce myself. So firstly, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on where you are right now. Let me introduce myself. My name is Harsha. I'm one of the verbal experts at e-GMAT. I will be one of your hosts today. The other host is Shraddha. Shraddha is one of the senior most verbal experts, not just in e-GMAT, in the overall GMAT universe. We also have Sandeep assisting us today for any strategy related queries. So if you guys have any questions regarding e-GMAT or regarding your own preparation, Sandeep is your guy. If you put a question in the Q&A, he will respond to that as well. Welcome to today's session. It's all about what we call as key reading strategies. And this particular session is slightly application heavy. Key reading strategies are it's all about letting you know how you can extract more from a passage, how you can comprehend the passage better. And it's going to be a slightly heavy session. And in order to help you with that, we had sent a couple of video lessons your way. So those were main point sessions, video lessons on main point 1, video lessons on main point 2. We had sent this your way. So if you had gone through this, it will give you a little more context to what we are going to do today. But even otherwise, you will be perfectly fine. Make sure that if you can, after you're done with the session, when you get time, go through these files. I think you will get a wealth of information on how to really do RC and specifically main point. These are part of your free trial. You can access this anytime by registering on e-GMAT.com. Let me also quickly tell you about our upcoming sessions. So at e-GMAT, we keep doing these sessions every weekend, apart from other sessions that we have. So tomorrow, for all those of you who are worried about algebra, so we have an algebra session tomorrow. A lot of us are kind of skeptical with algebra. I mean, everybody's comfortable with arithmetic, but geometry and algebra are concepts that quite a few of us typically suffer with. So we have the session tomorrow that's going to help you with all things algebra. Atreya will be taking this session. And next week is our critical reasoning seminar. So on Saturday, we have our pre-thinking critical reasoning seminar. So pre-thinking is an approach. The term has existed in the GMAT universe for a long time, but e-GMAT was the first to properly crystallize the term, build a process around it, and make it a process that actually works for all levels of questions on the GMAT as far as critical reasoning is concerned. So the session will be oriented towards assumption questions. We will be solving assumption questions. However, the pre-thinking approach that you learn, it applies to not just assumption, it applies to evaluate, strengthen, and weaken. So that's going to be a very, very good session as well for you guys. With that, let me talk about, let's understand the composition of today's batch. So right now there are around 130 of you here. Two questions that I'm very interested in. One is when you plan to take the GMAT. That poll is right there. Also, let me know what is your target GMAT score. For that, let me bring the poll right away. There you go. So let's understand what is the composition of this batch. What is the when are you guys planning to take the test, and what is your target score? And we'll take it from there. All right, so if I look at the first piece of data, when do you guys plan to take the GMAT? 40% of you plan to take it 2 months later, and that's for you guys. What we're going to discuss today is going to be very, very useful because you have all the time in the world to inculcate these strategies into the way you read your passages. Even for those of you, like 9% to 30% of you who have the GMAT planned in the next 30 days, 30 days is also more than sufficient to get a very good grip on what we're going to discuss today. You solve like 10 to 15 passages with the strategies that we discussed today. You should be able to do better in RC, irrespective of where you are on that preparation journey. Well, so let's talk about your target GMAT score. So I'm very happy to see the ambition in this batch. So 730 plus is around 67% of folks. And then if you add another 30%, so over 90% of the batch has that 700 plus aspiration. That's very, very good to see. We should really be aiming for that level. And for you guys who are stuck in that 670 to 700 range and want to take it up a notch, take it to the next level, the things that we discuss in the session, I'm sure are going to be very useful for you. With that, let's move to the main presentation pane. Let me first ensure that you guys can see the screen, see the presentation, because it takes a little bit of time to load. So if you folks can see reading comprehension strategies to read 90th percentile, put yes. We do that because typically it takes a little bit of time to load for quite a few people. All right, that's great, perfect. Very good to see that. So I'm going to take this poll away. So what is it we are all here for today? You're all going to try to get better at RC or reading comprehension by the end of the session. So there are three parts to this webinar fundamentally. The first part, I'm going to briefly discuss. Okay, let me just bring my pen because I noticed that I forgot to do that. Just give me 1 sec. Perfect. So the first part of this webinar is going to be a general discussion about your MBA journey and how we can help with that. This is fundamentally important because a lot of us are here for the first time. A lot of us want to get into those B schools. We've decided that we want to get a management degree, get into a good B school, and it's our first step into the GMAT universe, and it's probably the first time you're hearing about e-GMAT as well. So a little bit of context setting for you. Then we'll get to the main session. That's around 2 hours. And then if there are any further questions or any other questions, Rajat will come on for the last 20 minutes. You can ask all kinds of questions. Rajat, he'll be able to help you with those as well. All right. So let's talk about architectures of learning. So a lot of you, as I said, are probably in that stage where you're here, you've decided that you got to prepare for GMAT. It is the way to go if you want to get into a B school, good B school. You'll be wondering about what to do, how to prepare. And this is where, in terms of learning the stuff that's required for GMAT, there's something called as the architectures of learning that's very important to understand. Typically, there are 2 ways you can learn stuff. One is a book-based architecture, and the other is what we call as a private tutoring-based architecture. Book-based architecture is essentially how most of us did our schooling. We learn through books, right? You have a textbook, you have, concepts after concepts. Once in a while, you'll have a test or an assessment built in. Then your teacher will make you take some unit test or some test to evaluate how you're doing. That's it. Very few points of feedback. It's eventually book driven. If you're a diligent student who is able to learn from the books, you're good. Otherwise, it can be problematic. Why? Because you don't get a personalized mentoring approach. The other extreme, the other end of the spectrum, is what we call as a private tutoring based architecture. This is like having your own private tutor whose job is to understand how you're performing at each and every point, extract insights which can help you course correct as needed, and really get you there. So when e-GMAT started out, we had this ambition of creating a private tutoring based architecture. Initially, the ambition was, hey, let's get as close to a private tutor as we possibly can. I'm happy to say that now we have reached a point where we're actually better than a private tutor because we have been able to leverage technology to provide even more feedback points, even more personalization that has been driven into the course thanks to technology. So right now we're at a stage where we are even better than that. All right. So let's talk about why am I stressing so much about book-based architecture versus private tutoring based architecture. Why does this really matter to you? That's a question that you should be having. So let's talk about a typical student's GMAT journey. All right. So you've decided that you want to get into those fancy B schools. You need a 720 or a 730 or a 760. You don't just go and just write the exam, right? Once you set a target, then you set a learning path. Okay, on these particular days I'm going to read this. On these particular days I'm going to read something else. You basically make a plan, and then through that plan you start learning all those concepts. But this doesn't get you too far because GMAT is an extremely application heavy exam. It's not going to just test you on conceptual knowledge. The next step is you need to be able to apply this. So you start learning to apply these concepts. And fundamentally, for a lot of folks, this is where the bookish architecture already gives up on you. A lot of folks just learn at a very, very bookish level how to do this. Application is lost for a lot of folks, but some books or bookish approaches are even able to do that. But then this is not enough. Even this can get you only till a 680 or a 690 on the GMAT. To really get a 730 kind of score, essentially, if you're looking at 730 plus score, it roughly translates to what you call as a 95th percentile ability. In other words, you are better than 95% of the test taking population. To do this, you need an extra level. Everybody can apply. You need to be able to reach a level of mastery where you are better at applying these concepts than 95% of the test taking population. That requires mastery. And these are the points where a private tutoring based approach are much more helpful because they can actually focus on your weak areas. So I'm going to take one example of how a personalized approach helps you over a bookish approach. And when I say bookish approach, I'm not just talking about just a textbook like, some of those books for GMAT. I'm talking about even online platforms where the architecture is bookish. The same chapters that you will see in your books, sometimes they're just converted to audiovisuals. That again is just bookish architecture in an online form. I'm talking about architecture. So I'm going to take one example of how personalization can create the difference in your GMAT prep journey. All right. And that example we'll talk about is that first step of, creating that study plan, creating that path. So you want to move from a 600 to a 720. If you, for example, if you went for a book or if you went for an online platform that just has chapters, how will you proceed? You'll just start from the starting of the book and go till the ending of the book, do a couple of assessments here and there, take some tests here and there, and then hope to hell that you've figured it out. But this approach is a very cookie cutter approach. It does not work for everybody. Why? Because our individual strengths and weaknesses are different. For example, I am fairly strong in RC. I do not need to spend that much time on RC. I do not need to invest that much of my time and effort in RC. On the other hand, I need to put in a lot of effort to get SC right. So the kind of plan that you have to create should be personalized to you. So if that is something you don't typically get in the bookish architecture. But on the other hand, how do we at e-GMAT do this? How does any company that actually has a personalized architecture do this? The first step is to quantify your starting abilities. And I'm not just talking about your quant score and your verbal score. You have to get deeper. You have to get into your subsection. How strong are you in algebra? How strong are you in critical reasoning? You need to get to that level. Once you've quantified your starting ability, then based on where you actually need to put in effort, your milestones, what should you study when, by what time, those get decided, and your entire course gets personalized. If any of you have seen the latest Quant 2.0 course, you'll see that there are so many modules, but based on how you perform, the system actually tells you where you need to put in effort. It will tell you what you can skip because you really know this concept well, and it will tell you, hey, you need to focus a little extra on this. That personalization of course happens, which is something you will not see with the textbook. All right. So let's talk about how do we do all this. At e-GMAT, to quantify your starting ability, we encourage all of you to take a Sigma X mock. So a Sigma X mock is right now the closest approximation to the actual test. I don't think there is anything else that comes close at this point. So if you take a Sigma X mock, what you'll see is it quantifies your starting ability across multiple subsections. It's not just verbal and quant, it's algebra, geometry, critical reasoning, and so on. Then your milestones are set. How do we do this? For this, we have what we called as a PSP. So we spend thousands of hours on this so that you don't have to. This is an AI utility which can actually take in all the necessary information from you and personalize a plan that works for you. All right. So how does it work? You take in your current score, you input your current score, and once you input your current score, it takes in your target. What is it that you need to achieve? If you're looking for a 720, that's something like this. If you're looking for 740, you adjust accordingly. Then it decides, the system breaks it down and gives you a target score that is extremely customized to you. For example, I told you I'm fairly okay with RC, so 68 for me is very, very low. I'll be gunning for 90 here. On the other hand, when it comes to SC, I'll be happy with say 68 or 70%. It varies based on what you're good at and what you really need to get that target score. So once that is done, the system also takes into account factors such as, hey, when are you planning to actually take the test, and what kind of time can you devote on a typical weekday, on a typical weekend, because all these things decide how much time can you put in for each and every section. So you can see here whether it is arithmetic, algebra, SC, CR, RC, what you have here is a current score, and what you have here is a target score. So by the time you're done with this portion, you should be at this ability, and the system can track that. We can actually give you feedback if you're not here. We can tell you what is it you need to do further. And that's something you never get, or you get at a very, very minimal level with other approaches. So this is what I was telling about when I told you, you put in how much time you have available on a weekday, how much time you have available on a weekend. So essentially, personalized study plan is there for all of you. This is something that we offer for free. We help all our students, even if you're not an e-GMAT student, we help you out with this so that you can plan your studies. Now, the questions that some of you will definitely ask is, I obsessively told you so much about how a bookish architecture versus, personalized private tutor kind of architecture. Does it really translate to results, or am I just making it up? So let's look at results. 2016 is when GMAT Club for all things GMAT, we typically look at GMAT Club. 2016 is when GMAT Club started verifying the reviews. So the same ESRs that you send to all your universities once you do well on the GMAT, it's the very same ESR you send to GMAT Club. They verify that you've got this particular score. So ever since GMAT Club started verified reviews, we've got more reviews than all the other players in this particular market combined. So that's saying something. And that's a testament to what we've been able to achieve over the years. So some of you may ask, all right, that is over the years, that's since 2016. What about recent data? So let's look at Jan to May of this particular year, all right? Let's look at 700 plus scores as reported, as verified on GMAT Club. There are in total 190 of those, of which 40 are from folks who did self-preparation. These are folks who did not have to study anywhere else. The rest come from GC partners like e-GMAT or TTP or any of these other players. And e-GMAT and TTP contribute to around 70% of this. The 70% of 150 comes from e-GMAT and TTP. Let me show you the breakup as well. Around 40% of this, it's a little over 40%, and this is a little under 30%, come from these two. The rest is all, it's a very, very significantly low number if you ask me, as far as 700 plus scores are concerned in these 5 months. And this data also, this trend continues even into the last 5 weeks. If I look at a very tiny substrate of data that's recent, even then, e-GMAT has produced more success for its students than the next two players combined. So again, this is all me trying to tell you why you should go for a personalized approach, why you should go for a company like e-GMAT if you're looking for a very good solution. All right. So let me quickly bring up the link for this for any of you who are interested, who want to try it out, especially after the session. If you feel that, hey, I learned something good today and you want to check this out further, this is the link for you. Meanwhile, let's make sure that you guys also subscribe to our YouTube channel, because there you'll find unfiltered, unedited interviews of successful students, our students who have, these are essentially people who have been in your shoes. They're farther along in the journey that you're starting right now, and they can tell you all you need to know. Some of these interviews are pure gold. They'll tell you all you need to know, not just about preparing for GMAT, but it's also about preparing for B schools. You know, what are the pitfalls to avoid? What should you not write in your SOP, etc., etc. All right. Feel free to connect with Rajat on his LinkedIn. Rajat is extremely well networked in the GMAT universe. So if you want to stay up to date on all things GMAT, do connect with Rajat on LinkedIn. With that, let's kind of get into the core of the session. Let's talk about reading comprehension. Some of you might wonder, what does it take to get a 730 plus score in GMAT RC? As far as GMAT RC is concerned, what really does it take from you? The answer for that question is very simple, friends. If you want to get a score of 730 or higher, your ability in RC should be at least 90th percentile. What do I mean by 90th percentile? Again, it means that you are better in RC than 90% of the test taking population. If you're this good, that translates to a 730 level performance. Provided you don't mess up in the other sections, you can get a 730, right? So let's do what I like to call as a diagnosis. Before we jump into how do we improve RC, we need to understand our current approach. So there are fundamentally two components that I'm extremely interested in when I talk about RC approach. All right. One is called motivation. The other is called method. And we're going to discuss this. And both of these are very important to me. So the first question I have for you, and let me bring in the yes or no poll. How many of you enjoy RC? Let me remove broadcast results. So this is a question that I always ask in all these RC sessions. How many of you enjoy RC? If yes, fantastic. If no, I'll ask you why as well. And this is a completely low risk environment. It's not just for this question, even for the subsequent questions that we are going to solve. It's a low risk environment. Nobody is tracking your name and the response that you're giving. So feel free to be brutal. If you do not like something, just say it. All right, so let me broadcast results. Results this time are, I think that compared to some of the batch that we had last month, a lot more people like RC. Typically, I see this 20% like RC and 80% do not enjoy RC. There's still a majority of folks here who do not enjoy RC. Hopefully, by the end of the session, I can change that. I mean, we can change that. So the next question I have for you And this is for all of you who say, no, I do not enjoy RC. In the short answer pod, that is the pod on your right, why is it that you do not enjoy RC? What is it that irks you about RC? Let's figure that out. Let me start broadcasting these results as well so that you guys can also read what does the batch feel about RC. More pressure, takes too much time, yes, very lengthy. So there are a couple of points here. The length, the time taken, too much content to read, the content gets tricky, long paragraphs. All right, uninteresting topic. So topic, length, complexity of language, those are some of the points that I'm getting out of here. Sometimes the words are difficult, the word meanings are difficult. Absolutely. So in this session, in the next 20 minutes to half an hour, we are going to address a lot of these concerns. You talk about you not liking the topic, we'll discuss that. We're talking about complexity of language, we'll discuss that. We're talking about length, we're going to discuss that as well. And I will also talk to you about complex words. So that's great. Now, let's talk about the other piece, the other component of your approach, your method. I'm very interested to find out, how do you guys do RC presently? There are fundamentally three ways of going about RC. One, you skim through the passage. You take 1 or 2 minutes and quickly do a skim through the passage, and then you jump to questions. The second approach is where you do not skim. You just read the questions first and then jump and then go back to the passage and see what is it you need to pick up. All right. The third approach is where you spend time reading the passage first and then you go to the questions. I would be extremely interested in finding out which approach do you use. Let me bring in the poll for that. So there are three options for you. Which is your approach for doing RC? All right, so let me broadcast the results. So around 67% of us follow method 3 and around 33% follow methods 1 and 2. So let me speak about what works on the GMAT RC as per us. I'm not talking about any other exam like your SATs or your CAT. As far as GMAT RC is concerned, if you ask us, we believe that method 1 and method 2 are not optimal. They do not really work. And once you see the kind of passages that your GMAT typically tests you on, you'll have a better sense of why I'm telling you that. Method 3, as per us, is the best method. You really take time, understand the passage in depth, and then even though your initial investment of time is higher, when you go to the questions, you save a lot of time. And we're going to see that throughout today's session. So one of the goals that we have for today's session is for the 33% of you who are advocates of methods 1 and 2 or who currently follow methods 1 and 2, we want to bring you towards method 3. We want to introduce to you the magic of method 3. And for those of you, the 70% of you who are already trying method 3, hopefully this session will give you a good amount of takeaways on how to do it in a better way, how to get better at doing method 3. All right. So that's excellent. Now, the last part which I want to ask, and this is again what I call as a self-appraisal. So most of us come from, most of us are working professionals at some level, right? So the term I like to use here is self-appraisal. This is your own self-appraisal. As per you, what is your level of understanding once you have read the passage? Once you've read a GMAT passage, RC passage. So here's the poll for you. And this is your own self-appraisal. So let me broadcast the results here. So these results are always very interesting. It tells us, it's generally a very realistic depiction of the broad student test taking population. So around 75 to 80% of us are in that 50 to 90 bucket, right? And some of us are still at the less than 50% in your own appraisal, all right? So let me tell you what it really takes to do well on the test. I told you need 90th percentile ability, but in terms of passage comprehension, what does it translate to? It translates to 90th percentage ability, 90% comprehension ability. If you have successfully extracted at least 90%, then at some level you are well set on your RC journey. You should, by the end of the session, you may not get there. It still takes time and effort, but you will be a little farther along towards improving your comprehension. That's a guarantee. All right. So now if we are ready, let's talk about what we're going to do in today's session. What is it that we are exactly going to do? Our goal today is to help you ace reading comprehension, as it takes practice, it takes effort, but we're going to show to you an approach that is perfectly scalable and actually works. So we're going to introduce a couple of reading strategies, 3 to be exact. We're going to introduce 3 reading strategies. These reading strategies will help you extract much more from the passage than you're currently using if you're using a different method. Then that alone is never sufficient. Once you've extracted this information, we're going to teach you how to apply that information to solve questions, because eventually that's what we're all here for, right? So we'll show you how to solve questions using this. For doing this, we're going to take 2 small passages. We're going to take 2 tiny 1 paragraph kind of passages, just 2 questions, 1 main point question and 1 inference question. But through the discussion that we have here, you guys are going to get a much higher understanding of how to use the reading strategies to extract information, how to use that information to solve questions. But that's not all. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. So we're gonna apply everything you learned from step 1 and step 2 to solve a 700 level actual OG passage, the kind of passage that you will always see on your GMAT. If you're able to apply that, that's proof positive that, hey, this is a fantastic method, it can work for you. After this is done, we'll discuss a little bit about how do you actually go about prepping for RC. What is it that you need to do? So the first piece, I told you there are 2 components that are important as far as approach is concerned. The first is the motivation, the second is the method. So in this slide, I'm going to quickly discuss about the motivation and the attitude. Why is this so important? Some of you may ask, why are we not getting to the approach directly? No. Any approach that we teach you today does not work if you do not have the right attitude towards RC. And what do I mean by right attitude? Try learning something when you're not fond of it, when you're afraid of it, when you're feeling very blank about it. A lot of you have apprehensions about RC. It's complex, it's too lengthy, the sentences are dense, there are words that are unfamiliar. All of us have a little bit of this negative attitude towards RC. Unless you embrace RC and decide that, hey, I'm going to learn RC to the best of my ability, RC is also not going to smile back at you. So the first thing you need to do is have a learner's mentality. Have that attitude that, hey, I do not care what the topic is. It does not matter. I do not care how lengthy the passage is. I really do not care if there are complicated words that are used in the passage. I do not care about the length of the passage as well. Irrespective of all of this, in those 3 to 4 minutes of my time that I am devoting to this particular RC passage, you're investing your time and your energy in reading this RC passage, you might as well do a good job of it. If you go in with that negative mindset, oh, I don't like this topic, oh, this is too long, never, you're not gonna ace RC. Go in with that attitude of, hey, whatever the topic is, however long the passage, however dense the language, and whatever kind of words are used, I don't care. In these 3 to 4 minutes, I'm gonna extract every damn thing there is to extract from this passage, and I'm gonna answer those questions. That is what I call as 100% immersion in the passage. And we're going to show that. We're going to all do that right now. So stay tuned for that. Why is this immersion with that right attitude so important? Because then you actually are paying attention without any distractions. You can actually understand the author's intent. And we'll show that to you. All right. Now let's talk about the exact method that we are discussing today. There are 3 reading strategies that we are going to discuss today. 3 of the most important strategies. At e-GMAT, we actually have 7 of them, but we're going to discuss 3 of the most important ones today. The first is at the sentence level. The sentence level is what I call the molecular level. At the molecular level, you need to be able to understand sentences. So we're going to teach you how to break down extremely large sentences and understand the meaning and assimilate that meaning. The second one that we're going to discuss today is what we call as keywords. It's a very important reading strategy. Right now I'm explaining the theory, so pay attention. After this, we're going to do practicals. What do I mean by keywords? Keywords are specific words or phrases that are used by the author. The author is the person who writes the RC passage. Keywords are specific words or phrases that are used by the author to either convey a very specific meaning, or it's something that the author uses to organize his passage in his or her passage in a logical and coherent fashion. Now, the question is, are keywords words that we are not familiar with? Are they jargon terms? Absolutely not. These are words that all of us know. You will barely ever find a keyword that you do not know. So these are words you know that are there in the passage, but they are very important words. If you are able to pause when you see a keyword, if you're able to ask the question, hey, there is this keyword I saw. Why did the author put this word here? If you ask that question and understand why the author put it there, your ability to extract meaning from the passage will skyrocket because you're priming your brain to understand what the author's intent. I'll give you a very simple example. Let us say you see a line such as this: work from home. So most of us are working from home at this point, at least some of us are. Work from home is extremely good for employee productivity. So that's the statement I gave you. Fundamentally, I'm telling you something positive about work from home, right? It's fantastic for employee productivity. Now you see a keyword. The next sentence starts with the word however. So pardon my writing, it doesn't translate as well on the surface, but yeah. Now the next sentence starts with the word however. The question is what follows however. Here's a point. Typically, if you are skimming through the passage, if you're rushing through the passage, if you're not paying attention, you don't focus on this however. You just read it like you read your storybook. What happens if you pause here and ask the question, what will follow however? So on the short answer part, who can tell me what will follow however? Why did the author put however there? What is his or her objective? These are all words that you guys know. Exactly. Something contrast, there's some contrast that is being indicated, a negative point about work from home. All of you guys are right. See, we are not discussing anything that you guys don't know. All I'm going to do in the session today is let you know where you should point your attention. If you focus here, then you know that what is going to follow is a negative about work from home. It could be a sentence as simple as, however, work from home is very bad from an employee stress perspective. Now, this is a very simple sentence. Even if you did not focus on the keyword, you'll think that, hey, I can figure this out. What happens when the sentence is actually long and complex? Sometimes what follows that, however, is a very, very dense piece of text. That is when your keywords really show their magic. Even if it's very tough to understand the exact meaning of what the author has said, you still understand the author's intent. You know that, hey, because of that, however, the author is trying to indicate a contrast there. He's trying to indicate some negative of work from home. Therefore, your ability to absorb that information, understand the intent of the author is much better. This improves your comprehension a lot. Now let's talk about the third reading strategy that's very important. This honestly is the most underrated reading strategy. I'm sure a lot of you have faced that situation where very, very complex passage, sometimes your humanities passages tend to be that way. So, and after a point of time, you're completely lost. You have no idea what's happening in the passage. This happens because of a lack of summarization. Summarization means you're explaining, you're extracting it in your own words. So at e-GMAT, we would actually teach you that, hey, you have to summarize at the end of the passage. Once you've read the passage, you summarize it. That's what you call as a main point. That main summary is what you call as a main point. You summarize after each paragraph because each paragraph tells you a story. And once you figure out the story, you can figure out the logical flow. Paragraph tells you, one tells me this, paragraph two tells me this. So you figure out the logical flow of the passage, the sequencing of the passage, if you can summarize at the end of each paragraph. But that's not enough. You also have to summarize in between, even within a paragraph. You summarize whenever you reach a point of information overload. Whenever it feels like, hey, this particular information, it seems a little dense. How do I remember this? Whenever you reach those kinds of moments, you should summarize in your own words. The people who are able to do this, they are the ones who are able to not get lost in complex passages. Why? Because the entire passage is written in a very logical way. Point A leads to point B. Once point A is put by the author, the next point is point B. If you got lost and if you did not summarize point A, how do you hope to understand point B? It becomes very difficult. So this is a theory of it. Everything that we are going to discuss today. From now on, it's all practical. So who's ready to solve some questions? Let's hear a yes. I like to see some yeses before I start. So let's have a show of enthusiasm. Perfect. That's fantastic. Be participative, guys. It's low risk environment. It's all for your learning. So it should be a lot of fun. So now we're going to do the first question, the first passage. Ground rules. I will always keep bringing the polls onto your right, on your top right. And once you're done reading the passage, click on this particular done reading the passage, this particular poll. Click on yes in done reading the passage once you're done reading the passage. After that, I'll introduce the question. So this particular question is going to be a main point question. All right, here you go. All right, so I see that quite a few of you have done reading the passage. So I'm going to introduce the question on the main slide. For any of you who want to still refer to the passage, it's there below the done reading the passage poll. You can see the passage. You can scroll through that if you want to refer to anything in the passage. The question poll is at the bottom of the screen, Q1. Let's click on still solving. There's this option called still solving. I would encourage all of you who are participating, and you should be participating if you're here. All of you who are participating, click on still solving. That way, I'm not going to time you. The group will time itself. So when a significant number of you have chosen options, I know that I can move on. All right, so here's the question. All the best. I can see that a lot of you are done. Let's take another 10 to 15 seconds and then we'll move on. All right, last 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'm going to end the poll right here. So let me take this away. We don't need this. Let me move the poll upstairs and let's get some feedback. What do you guys feel? What do you folks feel about this particular question? How was the question? Or rather, more important, forget the question. How was the passage? Let's hear your thoughts on the passage before we jump into anything else. Couple of easies, a lot of difficult, complex, complicated, confusing, not very tough. So a bit of all, but I think a lot of us believe that it's somewhat complex. But within the next 10 minutes, you're going to change your mind. Those who believe it's complex, I'm going to show you how to go about such a passage. So let me also broadcast the results for you. So option B is the second most popular option choice. Option D is the most popular option choice. We're going to discuss this right now. All right. So let's understand what this passage is all about, shall we? And pay attention here because this is the crux of what you need to learn for today. All right. So let me clear this. Perfect. So pay close attention. Bordering on the extreme, one definition of EC. All right. I'm actually going to pause right here because even though we've touched only 8 words, there's already a lot to understand. So how this is going to work is you guys are going to tell me everything I need to know. I'm going to just tell you where to focus your time and energy. I'm going to tell you where to focus. I'm going to teach you where to focus. You guys are going to tell me the exact answer. And that's how this is going to work. So first question, you see this phrase bordering on the extreme. I want to understand, what does it mean? Why did the author put that there? What does the author mean when he or she says bordering on the extreme? That's the first question. Expressing an extreme viewpoint, absolutely. Not the general view, not generalized. I see what you're trying to say. Author has a negative opinion about EC. We'll come to that. You're close, but not exactly. So a lot of you are on the right track. Essentially, bordering on the extreme, one definition. So this bordering on the extreme is referring to this definition, but the author is giving us his or her opinion of that one definition. The author is telling us that, hey, whatever this definition is, it's a little extreme. Or in other words, it's a little exaggerated. That's what extreme means, right? When you talk about the mean is the general, it's the normal, what you expect. When you say extreme, therefore, you're talking about, oh, it's a little it's not what you typically expect. It's a little exaggerated. He's talking about this definition. So, good question. Bordering on the extreme, comma, one definition. It's referring to the definition. All right. So, is this clear? When he says bordering on the extreme, one definition, this bordering on the extreme is essentially telling you that, hey, as per the author, whatever this definition is, it's a little exaggerated. That's the first piece of learning here, which we should get. Is this clear? It's just the first 4 words, but if you pause there, you already understood something about the author. The author is trying to tell you that, hey, whatever this definition is, it's a little exaggerated. It's a little, not the regular mean. That's very important to understand. The next portion, one definition. Again, I'm focusing on one definition for one reason. Actually, 2 reasons. Why did the author use the word one definition? What is it that you can infer? I'm asking you to do inference now. What is it you can infer from one definition? When the author says one definition of ethnocentrism, some of you are already getting it. There are other definitions in all probability. That's true. That is true. That is one of the points that I want you to take out. There is another point that I want you to take out. So all of you are very, very clear that when the author says one definition, it means there are probably many other definitions, at least some other definitions. That's very clear. I can see that. Another inference that you should be making is this is not necessarily a definition the author agrees with. In fact, the author is actually qualifying this definition as slightly extreme, slightly exaggerated. He's already told you that I don't really agree with this definition. But fundamentally, what you should take away from one definition is, number 1, hey, in all probability, there are more definitions. And number 2, it's just one definition. It's not necessarily my definition. Is this clear to everybody? And you notice how we are going slow, we are breaking it down, but because we are going slow, we are getting all these inferences. There are 3 inferences we made on those first 8 words, if you guys actually observe. Now let's move on. Bordering on the extreme, therefore slightly exaggerated. There is this one definition which as per the author is slightly exaggerated. Definition of ethnocentrism, let's call it EC for short, EC, considers it alright, so we're going to get some description of this definition. A schismatic in-group, out-group differentiation. Okay, let's pause here. I don't know about you guys, but schismatic is a word that I'm not really familiar with. But what I'm going to show to you is that it doesn't matter. Some of you may know the meaning of schismatic, some of you may not. It does not matter. Let's just move on. So one definition of EC considers it to be some kind of in-group, out-group differentiation. Can I say, therefore, it's considered, one definition of EC considers it as some kind of a difference between something called an in-group and something called an out-group? That much we can infer, right? If not anything else, that much you can say, even if you do not know schismatic. Okay, it's telling me that there is some difference between something which is called as an in-group and something that is called as an out-group. That's it. Now let's move on. In which is a keyword. In which means that you're going to get a description of what was previously mentioned. So the author talked about differentiation between in-group and out-group. Now we are going to see a description of what this differentiation actually means. So in which internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, loyalty, devotion to the in-group. All right. This is a lot of words. It's a lot of dense text. This is where some of you might have gotten confused and given up. For some of you who are not able to figure this out. The question I have for you, when you have a lot of complex text that you need to understand, summarize it in your own words. So if you had to summarize this entire thing, internal cohesion, all the way till devotion to the in-group, if you had to summarize it in your own words, what would you say? Your answer in your own words. Be a little more specific. Positives towards what? Positive feelings towards what? It's not in-group activities. It's sentiments and feelings towards in-group. To the in-group, right? Not of the group. It's attitude towards the in-group. Absolutely, towards the group. Absolutely. So, cohesion, peace, solidarity, loyalty, devotion. You guys are getting this. Positive feelings, positive terms towards the in-group. Essentially, some kind of a positive sentiment towards the in-group, whatever in-group means. Everybody with me so far? We are going slow, but you understand how we are pulling the meaning one by one. Alright, so some kind of a positive feeling towards in-group are correlated with. What is the meaning of correlated with? Correlated is a keyword. End of the day, you can figure out what exactly is meant by are correlated with. What is the author trying to tell us? Related, absolutely. Some kind of a relation, some kind of a link is there between these two. So, what is this particular definition of EC? Some kind of positive feeling towards in-group is linked with a state of hostility towards out-group. Or in other words, a positive feeling towards in-group is correlated with or linked with a negative feeling towards out-group. With me so far? If this is clear, now it's very easy. Which again, whenever you see that, which, etc., you always ask the question, what is this referring to? Here, which is referring to out-groups, right? Out-groups which are often perceived as subhuman. The word subhuman gives you a hint. It means that we are not talking about a group of potatoes. We're talking about a group of people. Subhuman. So now the picture becomes a lot more clearer. So outgroups are perceived as subhuman. They're perceived as evil. So fundamentally, everything that we got so far in this is very simple. Firstly, as per the author, this is an exaggerated definition. Here it is. So what did we understand? There are three, excuse me, sorry about that. My voice is breaking a little bit. Please bear with me. So what are the three pieces of information that we got? Firstly, the author presents one definition of EC, not necessarily his or her definition, which also means there are multiple other definitions. That's the first thing you understand. Secondly, as per the author, this one particular definition which he or she has presented, it's a little exaggerated, it's a little extreme. That you get from bordering on the extreme. And thirdly, what exactly does this definition say? This exaggerated definition, as per the author, it says, hey, internal cohesion, or in other words, some kind of positive sentiment, let's call it love, for your own people, that is in group, is correlated with hate for outside people. How do we determine it's not author's definition? Because of one definition. It's just one definition. How do you know it's the author's definition? That's the question you should ask. If it was the definition, instead of one definition, if you had the definition, that means the author is giving this as the definition. It's given as the stated definition. Then you know the author agrees with that. Very, very good question. You should understand this difference. So fundamentally, point one, if you did not get point one, that means you did not focus on one definition, understand and infer what that really means. If you did not get point two, that means you do not focus on bordering on the extreme and understand what that really means. And if you are not able to arrive at this extracted definition, that means that you are not able to summarize. That is how we approach RC. Now the question I have for you is, and it's a very important question, how many of you were able to get all this and how many of you were not able to get all this? Let me put that to a poll, because that will show us how we are performing as a group. So select the items which you are not able to understand. There are 3 items I've given here, right? Let's see how many of us got what. Participate, guys, participate. This is your self-assessment. This is how you know where you are, what you're doing, how you're doing rather. So let me broadcast the results. Very interesting. 33% of folks here did not get point 1. That means that one definition was what tripped you. Another 36%, 37%, you did not focus on bordering on the extreme. Imagine the power of understanding all this when you're reading the passage. Imagine going to the questions having understood all this. If you do that, you will see that you take almost no time in questions. And I'll show you data towards the end of the session. If you analyze a passage at this level, each and every question that you solve in RC, lesser than equal to 1 minute is the time you typically take. And we're going to see that. So I think the results here are very, very illustrative. There's something for a lot of us to learn, right? I hope you guys get that. No problem. It's extreme only tells you that the opinion is that particular definition is exaggerated. One definition tells you that it's not necessarily the author's definition. One definition could be some third-party definition, right? How do you know it's the author's definition? How do you know the author agrees with it? That's the question you should ask. So now let's quickly look at the options. Let's look at the option A was barely chosen. But why is option A wrong? By the way, you guys will be getting this PDF. You guys will be getting this. Everything that we have marked here in red is the reason the option choice is incorrect. All right. So let's talk about option A. It says to criticize a concept that encourages hostility. Firstly, the author has criticized not the concept of EC, but one particular definition of EC. That also not the definition. It was an exaggerated definition. The author doesn't even agree with the definition. The author is not really, excuse me, sorry about that. The author has not really criticized EC itself. The author has only criticized that one definition of EC. Mild criticism by telling us that, hey, it's a little bit extreme. The second point you should ask here is, has the author anywhere told us that the concept encourages hostility? All we know is positive feeling towards in-group is correlated with negative feeling towards out-group. We are never told that the concept of ethnocentrism is what is causing or encouraging this hostility. We are not told that. How can we assume that? Is this clear? There are at least two reasons why you should reject option A for those of you who rejected option A. Perfect. Who were not able to reject. Let's come to option B. Option B is actually the most popular incorrect option choice. The first reason you should reject it is this word evaluate. To evaluate something in simple terminology means to assess something. If you're evaluating something, it means that you're assessing it. And to assess something, that means that you're looking at the pros of it, the cons of it. That is what enables you to. It is that assessment that enables you to make a decision about it. For example, if you're evaluating the decision to automate your warehouses, how would you do that? You would consider the pros of automating your warehouse. For example, you save on employee cost, and then you consider the cons of going for automation. It could have some con as well. And then that consideration of pros and cons enables you to take a decision. Evaluate means assess, as it typically involves assessing the pros and cons of something, looking at the pros and cons of something. The question you have to ask is that happening here? Has the author talked about what are the pluses of conservatism, of ethnocentrism, and what are the negatives of ethnocentrism? It's not happened here, right? That's the first reason you should reject it. The second reason you should reject it is the author has only provided a definition. Definition of artificial intelligence is different from the features of artificial intelligence. You know, all you're given is a definition which says that all these positive feelings are correlated with all these negative feelings. Nowhere are you given that, hey, these positive feelings are all features of EC, or these negative feelings are all features of EC. You're not given that. You don't know that. Which is why, again, for two reasons, you should have rejected option B. Let me ask a question here. Option B being the most popular incorrect option choice. Is this concept coming through? Clarity? You should reject this straight away for evaluate. And then you can also reject it for various features. Perfect. Let's look at option C. It's also somewhat popular. And this is where the people who fell for option C, you might not have focused on one definition. Because of the phrase one definition, you're not 100% sure it is the author's definition. In fact, the author told you that this definition is a little exaggerated. So has the author defined EC? That's the question you should ask. The author has not defined EC, right? He's just given you one definition of EC. That's the first reason you reject option C. The second reason you reject option C is, again, you are not given a hierarchy. You know that positive towards in-group is correlated with negative towards in-group. That does not imply hierarchy. That does not imply that in-group is at a higher level than out-group. You don't know that. We don't know that. That is our intrinsic assumption. Our brain is playing tricks on us when we are choosing an option like this. Be very careful. Which brings us to the only correct answer, to introduce the concept of EC by presenting a view on it. Notice the word a view. See how the option is also carefully crafted. It's not telling you by presenting his view or her view or their view. It is telling a view. Again, a view could be any third-party view. It's not necessarily the author's view, which is what you see in this passage, right? Any questions, anything that's not clear at this point before I move on to the next question? Sorry about that. Bit of a cold coming through. Perfect. All clear. I like to see that. The view that you saw was on the definition. That definition is a little exaggerated. So option D is the correct answer. to introduce the concept of EC by presenting a view on it. One simple way to understand this is I usually give this example. Uh, I'm only introducing you to the concept of EC. I'm not defining EC for you. This is like you come to my house for a party. I introduce you to a friend of mine. I am only introducing you to this person. I am not presenting my view on this person. I'm not telling you that this is a good guy or a bad guy. I'm not even defining for you that this person is so and so. All I'm doing is introducing you to that person. That's exactly what is happening with option D, and more importantly, that's exactly what is happening in this particular passage, which is why option D is the correct answer. Good. So I can see that this is clear to all of you. So there are some very important insights that you guys should pick up from this, and this is what I want you to focus on. The first piece, you really do not need to be an English scholar. Again, I still don't know what schismatic means. Right? You guys can go and Google schismatic if you feel like it. But I actually don't know what the word means. But what I want to try to tell you is, in your GMAT RC, in those RC passages, invariably you will always come across at least one word typically that you do not know. You cannot obsess over it. It does not matter. Why? Because GMAT is not like GRE. GMAT is not a vocabulary test. It's a test of your logical ability. It's a test of your ability to comprehend information. Absolutely nothing else. It's because it's not meant as an English test. It does not matter that I don't know the meaning of schismatic, right? Likewise, the entire passage that you guys just solved, and by the way, you guys solved it. I only asked you where to focus. All the answers came from you, right? Positive feeling towards in group. You guys said it. I did not say it. But how did we do it? Because we broke it down. We broke down that complex sentence into small, manageable chunks and extracted the meaning from each of those chunks. And then we saw the whole picture, right? You can break, it doesn't matter, or what I'm trying to tell you is the length does not matter. The complexity of the sentence does not matter. Unfamiliar words, it did not matter. And by the way, how many of you come from a background where you know what ethnocentrism is? Do you guys have knowledge of ethnocentrism from your previous work or whatever it is? Absolutely. Did it matter? For most of us, this is not a topic that we know about. But did it matter? We were still able to solve a question very, very accurately. Yes, from the previous mistake. I like that answer. For most of us, this topic is completely alien, if I may use a word from the passage. But it does not matter. So what I'm trying to tell you is length does not matter. Complexity of language does not matter. Tough words, absolutely I don't care. Topic is not something I'm aware of. No problem at all. So now let's move on to what is it you actually need to do well in RC. What we did right now. You saw how involved and immersed we were. When you say immersion, 100% immersion, there's a difference between the kind of reading that you're doing. There are two ways of reading something. You can read it like your storybooks or how you read your newspapers. You're just getting a general idea by skimming through. Or you can read it this way, the way we did it right now. Each and every sentence broken down, you're understanding every nut and bolt properly. This kind of reading will do wonders on your GMAT RC, at least for RC. So make sure this point is coming through. Read for comprehension, do not read for speed. Skimming is a fool's errand. It's not going to help you on GMAT. You'll be lucky if it helps you on GMAT, but don't count on it. Break down big sentences, focus on keywords. One of you mentioned keywords is key. Absolutely, keywords is the most important thing. You saw how that summarization helped you. So you guys did it, not me. Alright, so who's ready for question number 2? Let's again hear a few yeses before we begin. And let me take this out. Let me take out the poll. Can we say introduce is a narrow term as compared to define? Not really. There are two different things, right? Defining something is not the same as introducing something. Narrow is not what I will call it, but I get what you're saying. Fundamentally, to define something is different from introducing something, right? Perfect. So I like all those yeses. Let's get to question number 2. Same approach. Once you're done reading, click on done reading. All the best, guys. This question, by the way, will be an inference question. Once you're there. All right, many of you are done reading the passage, so I'm going to introduce the question now. Why don't you click on still solving? Those who are done reading the passage, why don't you click on still solving so that we can bring in the question now. All right, so here's the question, guys. The poll is already open. The passage, if you need to refer it, it's always there on your right. The question, here you go. Remember, this is a GMAT inference question. All the best. Most of us are done. Let's take another 10-15 seconds and then let's discuss this. All right, folks, last 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and let's hold this. All right, so let me take this away. We don't need this anymore. Let's let me broadcast the results first. It's a very interesting response this time. So option B was the most popular, around 36% of you. D and E are somewhat equally popular, 21-23%. And then you have A and C, which are not that popular. All right, so I'm very interested to know how you folks found this particular question. So let me bring in that short answer poll again. I also hope that you guys are beginning to enjoy RC a little more. Very interesting topics, right? So anyway, how was this passage? Multiple answers seem possible. Yes, I know where you're coming from. I know why that happens. Uninferable. All right. Difficult, easy. Okay. Some of you found this easy. So let me also be honest here. Very few of you have actually got the correct answer. And by the time we discuss it, you guys will tell me what the answer is. So very interesting. Let me refresh this. All right. So yes, I'm going to address this point. Thank you for whoever has posted that. It's often confusing to differentiate between inference and what is already mentioned. Spare with me for the next 10 minutes. You'll have your answer for that question. Before we jump into the passage itself, let's take a slight tangent. There's something I want to discuss. This is the question I have for you. I am the author. Assume that I am the author. I'm telling you, this is the line that I'm telling you. The color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on the moods of people. The question I have for you based on this particular statement is, and just give me 1 minute, where is it? Yeah, here it is. The question I have for you is, which of these is a valid inference? You have statement 1 and you have statement 2. Which of these is a valid inference? What can you infer from the statement above? Or can both be inferred, whichever way. Let me open this poll for you. And now let's hear some answers. This question is very important because it fits directly into what we're going to discuss in the passage. And if the concept here is clear, then the passage will also become clear for you. Alright, so a lot of you have given your answers. So around 70% say only statement 1 can be inferred. And the rest of you are unfortunately incorrect here. So around 30% of you are actually incorrect when you say option B can be inferred or both can be inferred. So it might be a little surprising, but let me explain why this is. All right. The question you have to ask here is, hey, I as the author tell you the color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on the moods of people. The question you should ask is, who is doing this consideration? How do you know 100% how do you know with 100% certainty that the author also considers blue to have a soothing effect on people? That's the question you have to ask. Some of you will automatically think that, hey, this is the author because this looks like passive voice, right? In the active voice, the author would say the color blue the color blue has a soothing effect, and in the passive voice, he or she would say the color blue is considered to have a soothing effect. Some of you might think that, but here's the problem. When you have the word considered, you cannot 100% be sure whether the author is the one doing this consideration. For all you know, it's the general consideration. Generally, people consider blue to have a soothing effect on people. It's not necessary the author agrees with that, right? Is this coming through? How do you know 100% that the author also considers blue to have a soothing effect? From the way the sentence is written. And that's why 70% of you got this right. 70% of you told me only statement 1 can be considered, because you asked the same question. How do we know that the author also considers blue to have a soothing effect? Is this coming through for the remaining 30%? The concept is, you're not sure that the author agrees to this consideration. So you have to ask that question. Who is doing this consideration? Does the author agree? You really don't know. And therefore you cannot infer, because inference means you're 100% sure of it. That's the point. If this is clear, now imagine if I'm the author, if I wanted to communicate that blue has a soothing effect. If I agree with this, how will I mention this? I would write it this way. The color blue has a soothing effect on the moods of people. Here, you're 100% sure that the author believes this, because I as the author am telling you, it's not considered, it's not deemed, it's not believed to have a soothing effect. Considered, believed, deemed, you don't know 100% whether the author agrees. But here you know. The author, I am telling you color blue has a soothing effect on the moods of people. Absolutely, you're right. When you remove the word considered, it actually means it. I agree with you. So, is this concept coming through? This is very, very important. Because a lot of you who chose options like B, and I think D also I presume, it's because you did not pay attention to the similar thing in the passage. What is that similar thing we're talking about? Right here. Those of you who saw this, you would have got it. Those of you who did not see this might definitely missed it. So a fact, that's a good question. But when I say author's belief, that includes what the author has stated as a fact as well. This is not critical reasoning where I have to make the distinction. That's a good question, but here I don't have to make the distinction. Even if the author is stating a fact, the author is assumed to be a logical person. That means that the author agrees with the fact. So fundamentally, don't take the word belief or opinion. It's the author's view. The author, if he or she places a fact in the argument, you're right, it's a fact, but the author is assumed to be a logical person. Therefore, the author agrees with that fact. So that's that, and we are actually going to discuss that again as well. It's a very important point that you've raised. Is this concept about deemed to be clear? It's the same, right? Deemed to be, believed to be, considered to be. Fundamentally, let's start doing this passage, and again pay attention here, very, very important. Ethnocentrism, let's call it EC, and its canonical variants. Okay, a lot of us may not know the meaning of the word canonical, but it's okay. In this case, I actually know the meaning of the word. It means something like identical. But even if you do not know, it's totally fine. Ethnocentrism and its different variations are deemed to be or considered to be intimately connected with xenophobia. Let's call xenophobia as XP for short. All right. Now, if you pay attention to deemed to be, the one inference that you can draw here is similar to the last one. Just like in the last passage, when the author said one definition, you are not 100% sure it is the author's definition. Here, when the author says EC and its variations are considered to be or deemed to be connected with XP, you're not 100% sure whether the author agrees with this assessment. Absolutely, not necessarily. Somebody stole the exact words from me. All right. So, is this clear so far? We are going to discuss about inference. I hold on to all those questions about inference. I'm going to answer that in 5 minutes, okay? But to answer your question, it's all about the author. The author matters, or the author is the king or queen. So let's come back to this. So EC and its different variants or identical variants are deemed to be or considered to be intimately connected with XP. Or in other words, there are at least some people who believe that EC and XP are intimately connected. That's what you get from this section till here. Then you have a comma, and then you have a complex attitude system cum sentiment structure involving aversion, dislike, and antagonism vis-a-vis the strange or the alien, and everything the stranger or alien represents. So I'm going to give you a small exercise. Who can summarize this in your own words and put it on the short answer pod? This entire thing I've bracketed here, from a complex attitude system to stranger or alien represents. Definition of XP is correct. That's also a correct answer. But let's go I agree with that. But let's also go one level deeper. You understood what the author has put there. That's a definition of XP. The next question is, what does the definition say? Summarize that also in your own words. But that's where you see magic. Some of you are doing it. Aversion towards a strange or unknown. Absolutely. Phobia towards foreign people. You're taking the actual literal usual definition, but you're right, of course. Dislike towards strangers. So you guys can see these options, right? The answers that you guys are putting in. You guys are getting it. Firstly, the author has given the definition of XP. That is correct, definitely. And secondly, what does the definition exactly say? Some kind of an aversion or a dislike for the stranger, towards the stranger or alien. This entire complex piece of text, you guys have summarized and told me as some kind of negative feeling towards the alien or the foreign. I had this here, but before I put it here, it came from you. Which is, for me, is proof positive that you guys can know how to summarize if I tell you where to focus. So you guys focused here and told me that XP is hatred for aliens. All right. And some of you even pointed to me that, hey, this is a definition of XP. That's also true. Now the question I have for you is, perfect, dislike towards the other kind. Now the question I have for you is this definition something the author agrees with, or is this something the author does not agree with, or do you not know about it? I'm actually happy to see this, because typically when I ask this question, I see more we are not sure whether the author agrees with it rather than agrees with it. In this batch, it seems to be the other way. So you are correct. The author does agree with this definition, and let me explain let me explain why for those of you for whom this is not clear. I'm going to bring an example here. Let me just search for it. Just give me 1 sec. All right. This should be the one. So you guys should see guys should see this note on the screen. Verbo is considered a unicorn, a company with $1 billion valuation. The question is, Verbo is considered a unicorn. So as per the author, we don't know whether the author believes Verbo to be a unicorn or not. Verbo is considered a unicorn, but 100% we are not sure if the author also considers Verbo to be a unicorn. But what follows the comma? A company with $1 billion valuation. That is essentially the author telling us that, hey, this essentially is what a unicorn is. Is that coming through to you? That, hey, the author is telling us fundamentally what a unicorn is. He's stating that as a fact for us. What is a unicorn? Hey, this is the fact. This is what a unicorn is defined as. Absolutely. If I was the author and if I wanted to show that I don't agree with this definition, I would say something like Verbo is considered a unicorn, which is believed to be a company with $1 billion valuation. So a unicorn, and again you'll have something like believed to be a company with a $1 billion valuation. Unicorns are companies that are believed to have something like that. So when you see this first line, it becomes very clear that what follows the comma is actually the author giving you the definition of a unicorn as a fact in the passage. Even look at the second example also for everybody who wants Google. Google, an internet company, is considered a good buy. Whether Google is actually a good buy or not, as per the author, we are not sure, because the author only says Google is considered to be a good buy. Not 100% sure whether the author agrees with that. But whether Google is an internet company or not, is it up for debate? No, right? It's very clear. Google is an internet company. The author has given that as a fact. Is this clear? For all of you who felt that, hey, I'm not sure whether the author agrees with this definition of XP, now that point should come through. Fantastic. I like seeing those yeses. So what do we have so far? Let's come back and summarize. At least there are some people who believe that EC and XP are intimately connected. All right. Then the author tells us what XP actually is. What is XP? At some level, it is hatred for the alien or the foreign or the stranger. That's what we have so far. Now let's move on. Some socio-cultural anthropologists. Again, notice how when the author wants to let you know that this is not necessarily his or her view, they make sure you know. So some anthropologists even considered XP and EC opposite sides of the same coin. Very important sentence. Let's pause here. All right. So who can tell me the meaning of this keyword even? What is even doing here? What does that tell you about the sentence? What is the author trying to say through this sentence? Oh, fantastic. Some of you have got it. Extreme view, right? Essentially, he or she is taking what they said in the first line to the next level, to the next extreme. It's not conflicting view, it's next extreme. Some of you got confused here because you saw the word opposite and you thought, oh, this means that EC and XP are opposite to each other. Or, I mean, they're not intimately connected. You equated opposite with saying that they're not really connected. But the problem is, you guys didn't see the whole phrase. Opposite sides of the same coin. What can you infer about opposite sides of the same coin? In any coin, if you have a heads, you also have a tails, right? These are the two opposite sides. The one thing you can be sure about is belong to one. I like that answer, belong to one. Fundamentally, one, you cannot have one without the other, right? It's the same thing, just two sides of the same thing. Type of same phenomenon. I understand what you're trying to say there. Essentially, you're saying it's practically the same thing. It's just that there are two sides of it. SCA thinks they're part of the same package. Absolutely. Those answers are all correct. So opposite sides of the same coin is actually telling you that they are extremely... How can one thing have two sides? Your coin has two sides, right? For example. But think about it. The word even is very important. Some of you rightly pointed out that it is taking it to that next extreme. Let me summarize this again for you. Some people believe that EC and its variants are intimately connected with XP. Some people believe that EC is intimately connected with XP. Then you have these anthropologists who say that EC and XP are not just intimately connected, they are so strongly connected, they are practically opposite sides of the same coin. They are so strongly connected that they practically coexist. You cannot have one without the other. Even is adding to the fact. Absolutely. I will also give you an example here to make the use of even crystal clear. So just give me one sec. Look at the example I have here. Shaq as in Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq was the most dominant basketball player of his time. Some analysts even consider him to be the most dominant player of all time. This is exactly what's happening here in this passage, right? Firstly, Shaq, the author is telling you that, hey, Shaq was the most dominant player of his time, of his era. Now there are these other people who are coming in and saying that, hey, he was not just the most dominant player of his time, he's actually the most dominant player of all time. I'm basically taking it to that next extreme. That is what even is doing in this sentence. It's even is that connection that connects line 1 to line 2. If you figured this out, then you would not have gone wrong in this question. Even can also work the other way. So I have given an example for that as well. GDP is increasingly a poor measure of prosperity. It is so bad that it's not even a reliable gauge of production. Increasing the intensity. Beautiful. So everybody clear with the flow of the passage now? What's exactly happened so far? EC and XP, as per some people, intimately connected. Then there are these anthropologists who come in and say, hey man, they're not just intimately connected, they are so strongly connected that they're practically opposite sides of the same coin. So if you did this connection between line 1 and line 2, imagine going to your option choices with this understanding. So let's move on now. Let me move on now. If there's a question I've missed, just put it in the Q&A, we'll answer that, don't worry. All right. So let's move on. But is a very important contrast word, just like however it indicates a contrast. So I can actually predict what would follow. You're given that, hey, some people believe EC and XP are so strongly connected, but so what will follow? Something which says that they're not that well connected also. So, but a few voices have cautioned that this need not be the case. And again, notice how the author lets you know this is not necessarily his or her view. That's why he says a few voices, not necessarily him or her. All right. Is this coming through? Everything clear so far? Good. So we're going to do the same exercise again. If you guys read this passage at this level, these are the 4 points that you should have got, right? Firstly, the author has told you that as per some people believe that EC and XP are closely connected, intimately connected. Then the author actually defines XP for us, and this is the author's definition. This is given as the definition of XP. So we know that the author believes this to be true because it's a fact. Thirdly, some people believe that EC and XP are not just well connected, they're so strongly connected that they practically coexist. That's this one. And finally, some other people, but a few voices, have told us that it's not really that strongly connected also. Okay. All right, I can see that. Okay, my voice got lost for a second. I'll repeat that just to ensure this is very clear. This portion is very important. So fundamentally, you guys should be able to hear me now. My net is back on properly. There are 4 pieces of information that you should have got from this particular passage. Number 1, the first sentence tells you that there are some people at least who believe that EC and XP are intimately connected. That's your point 2 here. Then the author has defined XP for you. This is the definition of XP as given by the author, given as a fact in the passage. That's point 1 here. Then the author tells us that there are these anthropologists, some people who believe that EC and XP are not just connected, they are so strongly connected that they practically coexist, opposite sides of the same coin. And lastly, then there are these other people who say otherwise, who say that they're not that strongly connected also. 4 pieces of information you can extract from this. Same question as last time. What were you able to pick up? What were you not able to pick up? Because this tells you if you missed out on something, you know where you're going wrong. What is it that you were not able to pick up out of these 4 points? I can see this understood all has increased compared to last time. I'm liking that a lot. Summarize it exactly the same. Fantastic. EC and variance believed to be connected with XP. Okay. Aversion to strangers. That's fine. Some believe it's opposite side of the coin. Okay. That's basically your summary. Perfect. That's a perfect summary. So 57% of you, 60 odd percent of you, you guys have got this. For the remaining 40%, go through this explanation again. You guys will obviously get the recording as well. Go through this explanation again. See how slowly we have worked through this. That's how you solve RC. It's not about reading fast. A lot of people will try to tell you that, hey, you should be able to read fast. Absolutely not. You see the speed with which you're breaking down each and every sentence. Very, very slow. Be methodical, be careful. It will save you a lot of time and heartburn when you go to option choices, if you understand the passage at this level. Otherwise, things get very difficult when you reach the difficult passages. These strategies may help or may not help when you're looking at very easy passages, but when you get to the real tough passages, 700 level kind of passages, if you're not extracting information to this level, whatever be your method, it's going to get difficult. That's why you need to be able to do it. All right. Now let's get to the answer choices. But before that, I'm going to address that elephant in the room. A lot of us have some doubts about what exactly GMAT inferences are. All right. So these are, you can consider this to be 700 level. None of this is easy. For the general student population, none of this is easy. Okay. And the passage that we're going to do in the next 40 minutes is also not easy at all. Considered to be fairly difficult. Now, what is a correct inference? This is a very important question. A lot of you have doubts about this. So pay close attention. The first point you should know is, a lot of us have this idea or notion that an inference has to be a completely new logically deduced point. It has to be something that's not given, but it's something that has to be derived from the information. Is that not true? Most of us believe that, right? Yes or no? Absolutely. So let me break that bubble a little bit right here. As far as the GMAT is concerned, the definition of inference is very, very clear. As far as GMAT is concerned, whether you're looking at CR or whether you're looking at RC, this is typically where you see inferences, both in CR and RC, an inference is simply what is 100% true or what is definitely true if your given information is considered to be true. Okay? That need not be an unstated truth. It can be a stated thing also. And that's what I need you to understand right now. Essentially, the definition is, if the given information is true, what is 100% definitely true? If that is the definition of inference, that means even restated given information will be a valid inference. Why? Because that is also true, right? This you will see both in CR and RC. It's very rarely seen in CR. It's 99% of the times you don't see that in CR. But even in CR, this definition is valid. In RC, on the other hand, you will see this extensively. Is this clear? This is a very, very important point. It goes against what we typically understand inferences to be. So fundamentally, what I'm trying to tell you is, a restatement of given information is a perfectly valid inference. I just repeated it. Restatement of given information is a perfectly valid inference. It need not be a new point. That's what you should take away. That's point number one. The second point, as far as RC GMAT inferences is concerned, is the author is the king or queen. The passage is written by the author. If it's not something that aligns with the author's point of view, if it's not something that the author believes to be true, then you cannot call it a valid inference. What that means is, say in the last passage, that one definition of EC, it's not necessarily the author's definition, which means that that answer can never be a valid inference. Likewise here, some people believe EC to be intimately connected with XP, not the author. You don't know whether the author believes it or not, which means it's not definitely true as per the passage. And therefore, anything that's not definitely true as per the author or as per the passage is not a valid inference. Which is why we say a correct inference is always from the point of view of the author. It has to be something which, from the passage, it's clear that the author believes this to be true. Is that clear? It's very, very important. And this is the reason some of you did not choose the correct answer. Perfect. So, two very important points we just discussed. Number one, the point of view. It has to be something the author believes to be true. And number two, a valid restatement of information from the passage, if it is something that the author believes to be true, is also a valid inference. The third aspect is what some of you hinted about while we were discussing this. In this particular passage, remember the author introduced the definition of XP as a stated fact. The author was telling us, hey, you, the reader, this is the definition of XP. It was given to us as a fact. Now, the author is assumed to be a logical and sensible person. If he or she is given something as a stated fact, if he is a logical person, that means that he believes something that to be true, because it's a fact. If it's a fact, it's meant to be true. Author is assumed to be logical. Therefore, if the author is given something as a fact, like that definition of XP, That means the author believes it to be true. And if the author believes it to be true, it can be a valid inference. So now some of you would have figured out what the correct answer is, right? Any doubts here on inference? Any questions on inference as far as GMAT is concerned? You will see this a little more in RC. In CR, it's mostly a new deduce point, but in RC, because of the author-centric nature of RC, it's a little, these kinds of points come in. Perfect. I like that clarity. So if this is clear, now we can run through these options very, very fast. Option A, 18% of you have chosen this. So the question was, which of this is a valid inference from this, right? So let's look at statement 1. XP and EC are different facets of the same concept, or in other words, opposite sides of the same coin. Same coin, two different opposite sides. Similarly, same concept, two different facets. Fundamentally, oh, this is very helpful. Thank you. So fundamentally, option A tells you XP and EC are opposite sides of the same coin. But the question is, this is the view of some anthropologists. It's not necessarily what the author believes in. And therefore, you do not know if the author believes this to be true. And therefore, you cannot call it a valid inference, which is why option A is wrong. Notice that if you have analyzed the passage at this level, rejecting these incorrect choices is going to take you less than 5 seconds. That's why I tell you each and every question can be solved very, very easily. All right, now let's move to the next one. Option B, think about it. Option B is the most popular incorrect option choice. But why is option B incorrect? 36% of you have chosen option B. Why is it incorrect? Only because those of you who chose option B, you did not understand the importance of deemed to be. Now tell me, do you guys see why option B is incorrect? The author never told you that EC is closely connected with XP. It's a deemed opinion. You have to ask, who is deeming this way? Who is considering it to be this way? Not necessarily author's view. See, the point is, it's not. I wouldn't say it's not the author's view. It's not necessarily the author's view. We don't know what the author's view is. So let's be very clear on that. Okay. Let's not call it not author's view, not necessarily author's view. That's how you should pick it up. You interpreted it from the last line, but again, it's the view of some people. What you'll learn from it is it's not necessarily the author's saying. The main point is the author has not given you his opinion on this matter at all. So this was the most popular option choice, but unfortunately it's incorrect. And the key was focusing on understanding what deemed to be actually means. These small things, if you spend time, you will pick all this up. You would have rejected this option choice in less than 5 seconds. You would have read this option choice and say, but hey, this is not necessarily author's view, therefore reject. That's how quick you can reject these option choices. Very, very, very important learning there. All right. Okay, now let's move to option C. Option C was the least popular, but I know that a lot of you rejected option C because you believe that XP and EC are connected to each other. But again, that's not the correct reason to reject. The correct reason to reject it is because honestly, you don't know what the author believes. You don't know with 100% clarity whether XP and EC are connected or are they not connected. It's not that they're connected, it's that we don't know whether they're connected or not as per the passage, or in other words, as per the author. So I hope the option of logic of C is clear. Option D was also somewhat popular, but you have absolutely no reason to choose option C because of the word cause. Cause means there is some causality being implied here. Option D is telling you that XP is causing EC. How do you know that? There's no cause and effect relationship mentioned anywhere. Right? The E word even emphasizes the connection for option B. No, it's not the author's view, right? Some people believe that EC and XP are connected. Some other people believe that they are not just connected, they are even more connected. That even is connecting two sentences, both of which are not the author's opinion. You still don't know what the author believes in. That's the fundamental truth. I hope that's clear now. Which brings us to the only correct answer here. Why is this the correct answer? It is the definition of XP as given by the author. The definition, not one definition, some particular definition. It is the definition provided to you as a fact. The author is assumed to be a logical person. If he is given something as a fact, that means because it's a fact, he believes that to be true. If something is definitely true as per the passage, then it can be a valid inference, even if it is a restatement of given information. And that is why option E is the only correct answer. Is this coming through? Why option E is the correct answer? Perfect. I think as far as this is concerned, you guys would have learned a little bit here in terms of what inferences actually are. R does not necessarily mean certainty. The deemed to be makes it uncertain fundamentally. If you remove, as somebody pointed out in that considered, if you remove that word deemed to be, if the sentence is EC and XP are intimately connected with EC and its variants are intimately connected with XP, if you see that, then obviously that's the author saying. But because of deemed to be, that goes out of the window. Perfect. So it's going to be a light for the next 2 minutes. I'm just going to recap. That's your break. So again, look again at how we immersed ourselves in this topic. We didn't go in with that unhealthy attitude of, hey, what is this EC? What is this XP? Why do I care about this? I know I don't like RC. It's very complicated language. You don't go in with that attitude. You go in with the attitude that I don't care about topic, I don't care about length, I don't care about complexity, whatever it is. In those 3-4 minutes, I'm gonna crack it open. That's the attitude you want. You need that killer mentality for RC. So 100% immersion, read with intent. Second, you saw again how we broke down those sentences. That's the key to tackling long sentences. In whatever RC passage you see, if the sentence is really long and complex, go slow, break it down. You are meant to go slow. You have the time for it. Don't worry about time. Focus on keywords. You saw how deemed to be decided whether you chose option B or option D. All of you went for option B because you did not understand the importance of deemed to be. You saw how even connected those two sentences. And again, your actual answer here was a summary. Your ability to summarize complex information in your own words. I did not do the summary. I only asked you to summarize it. You guys pointed out the summary, which means it tells me that if you put your mind to it, it's something you can do. That's all you need to do. So with this, we're done with my portion. Let me hide this. Some of you have been pinging about the study plan. I think some of you who joined late have been pinging about the study plan. So let me ensure that for those of you who want to get in touch with our experts for this, you can do that from this particular session, from this particular link that's provided there. With that, I'm done with my portion. Shraddha, you're not yet audible while you figure it out. Let me just answer that one question. Suggested time window for reading the passage. It should take you somewhere between 3 to 4 minutes. 3 minutes if it's a medium length passage, 4 minutes if it's a bigger passage. While Shraddha fixes the audio issue, let me tackle some of those other questions that I saw. Thanks for the feedback. A lot of you have given very good feedback. Thank you about that. Insightful. Yes, we are hoping it's insightful to you. You understand that inference is something which should not be clearly stated in the passage. All right, so now you know. There's something interesting that you learned. Perfect. I think that clears all the doubts. Shraddha, I'm going on mute again for you. Meanwhile, if you guys can hear Shraddha, press yes in that yes no poll. Otherwise, press no. All right. When you start hearing her, press yes so that it's clear.
All right, am I audible now? Can you guys hear me? All right, I can see the stats changing really quick. Thank you so very much. And I'm sorry about that. You know, technology. Or maybe it's us. I'm not sure. All right, so thank you so very much, Harsha, for that beautiful cementing on the very basics of RC, how to read the passage. I think that does the maximum job for us. Read slowly, pay attention to the keywords. If we do that, there would be no question that we wouldn't be able to answer in RC. So thank you so very much. In this part, which is the last part of our session, in terms of solving questions, I'm going to show you a full-length passage. It's an official passage, considered to be difficult passage. You see the time 4 minutes, but I would actually leave it on to you guys as to how long do you take. So you guys are basically setting the pace for this part of reading the passage. So here you see the passage on your screen. Once you are done reading the passage, you will see a poll on your screen that would ask you, click yes if you're done reading the passage, and then I'll show you 5 questions related to this passage, and you will solve all the 5 questions one after the other, and then we would get into the discussion of the passage and the questions. All right, so all the very best. Whatever you have learned so far, however you have wired your brains to read through the passage, looking at the keywords, do the same with this exercise as well. All right, all the very best. Those who are done reading the passage can click on yes. Rest, you guys can take your time. Don't bother to say no, because if you're not, I mean, yeah, you can. That will give me at least a percentage as to how many of you are in here with me. All right, guys. In the interest of time, I think I would request all of you to now, get a little speedy with your reading, because we have 5 questions to deal with. And then we have the whole analysis and then the discussion of the 5 questions. So, we've started this session on a very good note. So let's have a holistic experience. I have 125 people in this class today with me right now. I would like to see more participation so that I know that you are learning, because the polls, the polls are the only way for us to get to know your responses, right? Because we are the only one who'll be speaking here. So all right, I'm gonna give you 10 more seconds to finish reading. Take any final notes that you're taking, any keyword that you need to focus on, and then I'll show you the very first question for this passage. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, I'm making a few adjustments on the screen right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the poll for the very first question, and I want all of you to click on still solving. Most of you are probably aware of this ritual that we do here. In the meantime, I will also bring in the passage so that when you start looking at the question, you have the passage to refer to. to facilitate you answering the questions. It's a scrollable pod. You can go up and down using the scroller to get to the pertinent portion. Okay. Anybody else who would want to participate in this, in the question answer session with me? I have just gotten 70 people saying still solving. Maybe a few more. Click on still solving, not on choice B. I've seen 2 people clicking on choice B. So come back. Okay. So here is your first question. The passage is primarily concerned with, that's your question number 1. I'm reading out the question to you because I believe it takes a few seconds for the screen to stabilize at many of your ends. So just want to make sure that you're looking at the right question. Okay. So this is your first question. All the very best. All right, more than 80% of you are done with this question. So for the rest of you, let's get to an answer choice. Countdown for 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right, I'll be ending the poll here. Last minute takers, anybody? Just click anything. Yes, no? All right. Bringing in the poll for question number 2. Before I show you the question, click on still solving, please. Let's do this part quickly so that I can show you the question. Let's push that number a little bit more. Little bit. Anybody else? Maybe couple? All right. Here is your question number 2 on the screen. Which of the following can be inferred? So keep all the points about the inference that you just learned from Harsha and apply that in this question. It's an inference question. All the best. All right. 10 seconds to finish this one. I'm not gonna do the countdown aloud. So I'm just going to let you know when you have five more seconds. 5. All right, closing the poll here. Anybody who wants to just click an answer choice and get done with it, let's do that before I close the poll. And here I go. Let's take a look at our third question, but before that, still solving. Could we do the same here? All right, few more. Keep that number rolling. All right, here comes the third question on your screen. It can be inferred from the passage. Ooh, another inference question. So all the best. This one seems to be tricky for you guys. All right, last 10 seconds. 5. All right, let's wind this one up. Let's select an answer choice and move on with this one. And here I will end the poll now. Okay. Getting in the poll for our next question, which is question number 4. Still solving, please. I know that happens. Choice Ian. Still solving, too close. Okay. Few more. Few more. We are getting there. Push it a little bit. Few more. All right. Yes. Now let's take a look at our question number 4, which says the author mentions patients' ages. These are the first few words for your question number 4, and all the very best. All right, this one came through quicker. Let's finish this one off now. 10 seconds. Five. All right, ending the poll here. And let's get done with the very last question for this session here today. Let me bring in the poll. Here we go. On your screen, click on Still Solving. I see a few responses in some of the answer choices. If you would just like to correct that and come back to Still Solving. All right, here is the very last question of the passage on your screen. According to the passage, which of the following? That's how the question starts. This is the very last question. All the very best. All right, let's get done with this one and then we will dive into the analysis of the passage and the questions. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, I'm closing the poll and getting it out of our way. And let's hear from you a bit about this passage. I'm shortening this note span and let me hear from you. How did you like the passage? What would you say generally about the passage? Was it good, easy, medium? The passage was okay, but the questions were tricky, the answer choices were tricky. How would you define this passage? Easy, moderate, moderate. Most of you. Questions were tricky, lengthy, confusing questions. Answer choices were tricky. Yes, fifth question was tough. I was thinking about that, and yes, that's what generally the students say. That, yeah, and passage was moderate, questions were tricky and confusing. That is what my feeling about this passage is also. Okay, so let's move on to our, that's not the question for us to think about right now. Let's talk about the passage, and I'm just going to focus on the main parts of this passage. I mean, I'm going to read through most of it, but I'm going to stop and explain those parts that are essential to understand here. So Frazier and Mosteller assert that medical research could be improved by a move toward larger, simpler clinical trials of medical treatments. The first thing we do is that we see Frazier and Mosteller, and we know that, you know, probably this would be repeated in the passage, and even if it doesn't, I'm not going to read Frazier, Mosteller all the time. So I shorten it up and I say F and M. And then what arrests my attention in this line is the use of the word assert. The author is not saying that the F and M suggest, or they say, or they put forth. The word is assert. That means there's a degree of conviction in what F and M suggest, or in what they are saying. And what they say is that two things can be done to make the medical research trials better, right? That's what it says. Medical research trials could be improved toward larger and simpler. So that's the first point, and that's the second point. Now I stopped here and then I thought about it, that, you know, the author is saying that let's make it larger, and at the same time let's make it simpler. So what really struck my attention, or what really caught my attention, was that how can we make something simpler if we are making it larger? So that got me drawn into the passage to really read that, okay, let's figure out how something that can be made larger can be made simpler at the same time. So that was my point of attention in this passage. Currently, it means the author is talking about, that's our keyword, the author is talking about how the medical trials are done today. Researchers collect far more background information on patients than is strictly required for their trials. And then we read something out of nowhere, substantially more than hospitals collect. By the way, it's very interesting to take a look at this part of the passage, because the author is not quantifying how much detail is taken by the researchers. It's just saying that they collect far more. And then we are presented with another comparison over here, substantially more than hospitals collect. So the whole point of mentioning this comparison is to impress upon the readers that researchers currently collect way more data. The emphasis is only on that part. I mean, is there any reason for this comparison as such? The only reason is that the author wants to emphasize on the part that currently medical researchers collect far more data than required. And thereby, so what is the result of collecting all that humongous data? Escalating costs of data collection, storage, and analysis. So the cost related to all these three aspects increase as the result of collecting far more data than required. Reading further, we again come across another keyword here, which is although. So we know that we are going to read a contrast. Although limiting information collection could increase the risk that researchers will overlook facts relevant to a study, FNM contend that such risk never entirely eliminable from research would still be small in most studies. So FNM were ready for this argument. Hey, you are saying that let's not collect so much data, right? What if we miss out on certain data that could be important for that research? FNM have their answer ready. They say that, by the way, that risk is never eliminable. You can never say for sure that no matter how much data you collect, you will be able to eliminate or avoid that risk completely. That's never going to happen. But in most of the cases, that chance will still be very, very, very small if you only collect relevant data and not too much data. Then they say, or then the author says, only in research on entirely new treatments are new and expected variables likely to arise. So FNM have done their research very nicely before coming up with their suggestion. Okay, so now we are done with reading the first paragraph, and this is what my passage analysis looks like. It talks about how to improve the medical research. In the first part of the sentence, in the first part of the paragraph, the author is talking about the benefits of simpler trial. So we saw that FNM is talking about making it larger and simpler. How can we make it simpler? Collect less data, and that way we will be able to simplify, improve basically the medical research. So that's the first paragraph is talking about this simpler aspect of simpler aspects suggested by FNM. Moving on. FNM propose not only, we are all familiar with this phrase from our SC preparation, not only, but also we know that the author is going to talk about two aspects about the discussed topic. So they say that they propose not only that researchers limit data collection, which is making it simpler on individual patients, but also that researchers enroll more patients in clinical trials. They should involve more people in their clinical trials, and this is their suggestion about making the clinical trials larger. And what will be the effect, or what will be the result of doing so? Obtaining a more representative sample of the total population with the disease under study. From this portion in the passage, we can easily infer that the way the clinical trials are done right now, their results are not representative. That's why FNM say that, hey, go ahead, enroll more people. In that way, the results that you will get will be more representative. That means the way they are doing it right now, that's not happening. And then the author describes it further. Often researchers restrict study participation to patients who have no ailments besides those being studied. A treatment judged successful under these ideal conditions can then be evaluated under normal conditions. Two phrases that must make you stop and ponder over. Ideal conditions and normal conditions. What do we mean by ideal conditions? The author has already presented it. Ideal conditions mean only those patients are included in the trial who only have that particular disease that is being studied, nothing else. But come to think about it, how many times does it happen that we are suffering with just one disease at a time? I mean, what's going on in our body, most of the times we ourselves do not know. And it is very common to have 2-3 ailments going on together, maybe more. So FNM is saying that, rather than making your screening so strict, including only people who have that condition, enroll more people. So what will happen is that first of all, the first benefit is that your sample will be representative. The second thing will be that the treatment that was identified successful for these ideal patients, the efficacy of these treatments can now be judged or now can be evaluated on people who may have more than one condition going on in their body. Okay, so these would be the outcomes of making the clinical trials larger. That's what this part of the second paragraph is talking about. Moving on to the very last bit in the sentence. Broadening the range of trial participants, FNM suggests what will happen if you broaden the range of trial participants. It would enable researchers to evaluate a treatment's efficacy for diverse patients under various conditions. That is what we just discussed, that if you are incorporating even those people who have more than who have other ailments apart from the ailment that is under study, you will be able to judge or evaluate the efficiency or the success of the treatment on people who are under various conditions, as in who belong to different, who can have multiple ailments and things like that, and to evaluate its effectiveness for different patient subgroups. So not only the efficacy of those treatments can be evaluated under various conditions, but they can be evaluated for their effectiveness for different kinds of patients. And then the author takes a step ahead to give us an example what he or she means by patient's subgroup. For example, that's my keyword. I'm getting an example for the patient subgroup. The value of a treatment for a progressive disease may vary according to the patient's stage of disease. So we all know that there are certain diseases that are progressive. For example, cancer. They are identified in different stages, or it has different stages. So what FNM is saying that if you include more people in your trial, you will be able to evaluate the efficacy or the success of that treatment, or the effect of that treatment rather, on those people also who might be suffering from a progressive disease and could be at different stages of that disease. So that's one subgroup, one patient subgroup. Then in the last line, the author presents an example of another subgroup. Patients' ages may also affect a treatment's efficacy. What does this mean? We all know that, doses, medical doses for the same ailment can be different in patients of different ages. For example, if you take a paracetamol to reduce your fever, the dosage for every age or every age group is different. Infants have a different dose, toddlers have a different dose, teenagers have a different dose, so on and so forth. So that is what FNM is trying to say, that hey, if you include people, if you include more people, then you will also be able to evaluate the efficiency of a treatment on people suffering from the same disease, but they are at different ages. How the people of different ages suffering from that ailment are reacting to that particular treatment. Right? So, to sum it up all, what we saw is that the passage starts by presenting the proposal made by FNM, and they presented a two-pronged proposal. Let's make the clinical trials larger. Let's make it simpler. Then they presented, why it needs to be made simpler and what will be the outcome of it. And then the second paragraph talks about why they should be made, why they should be made larger and what will be the outcome of making the clinical trials larger. Okay. So pretty okay, not too much going on in the sentence except for a few parts like ideal conditions, normal conditions. It required a little bit of deliberation over there, but if you did that, very good. Now let's take a look at the questions. So our first question was our main point question. And let me bring in the poll here. You guys did pretty well with the questions, I must say, because I was looking at your responses while you were selecting the answer choices. So main point question was fairly easily written. We know we've already spoken about it. The passage starts with the proposal by F&M. The first part talks about benefits of making it simpler, and the second one talks about benefits of making the clinical trials larger. So so let's take a look at the answer choices here. And if I broadcast the result, very, very evident. Most of you, 57% of the class did go with choice D, which indeed is the correct answer, describing proposed changes in the ways in which the clinical trials are conducted. Now, let's take a look at choice E, explaining how medical researchers have traditionally conducted clinical trials and how such trials are likely to change. Yes, we can say that the author is talking about traditionally conducted because the author has presented currently this happens, currently that happens, but whether they are likely to change or not has not been discussed anywhere in the passage. The author is not indicating anywhere in the passage that whatever F&M have suggested, it's all going to be accepted. No. We are just saying that this is how it goes, and this is what F&M suggests, and these will be the outcomes if their suggestion is taken. Okay, so definitely choice D is the correct answer. Now let's take a look at question number 2, which was our first inference question. What can be inferred about these studies in which only those patients are selected who have no other ailments? So why we have simplified the question for you over here? I mean, look at the bulk of the original question, you know. So I always tell our students that your reading and comprehension do not stop with the passage. You need to continue to read effectively your questions because you must be able to understand what exactly the question is asking you. Because sometimes what happens in all these fluff that the question creators use to make their question looks bulky, it often leaves you confused. And that's, if you don't understand the question, that's when you end up choosing wrong answer choices. Okay, so it's very, very important that you really sift out the main question, the real intent of the question or the real demand of the question. So what can be inferred about the studies which is mentioned in this part of the sentence? Often researchers strictly study participant. Okay. So we need to go back in the correct part of the sentence, and it is mentioned in the second paragraph. So why the author is saying that, what was that line? Yeah, often researchers restrict such study participations. So I always miss this over here, treatment. Okay, so basically here, what is the context? The context is that the author is asking, the F&M is suggesting that let's make the clinical trials larger. So we understood, we made an inference that, hey, the proposal to make the trials larger has come because the results are not very representative. Their results are, the result of the study is very, very limited. And also these studies, the traditional way of doing research, clinical researches, or the current way of doing them, they only include those people who are in ideal conditions and not in normal conditions. Okay, so these are the two inferences that we can make from that particular sentence mentioned in the passage. So with this understanding, let me bring in the poll for your thing. Oops, why did I move further here? Okay, so question number 2, choice A is the correct answer. And as all of you can see, the percentage is not as high as we saw in the previous question, but still, most of you did go with choice. All right. So let's take a look at choice D. I'll quickly talk about that one because that was the next most popular answer choice. It would allow researchers to limit information collection without increasing the risk that important variables could be overlooked. I just want to draw your attention to this answer choice because this is one of the traps, one of the very popular traps the question creators apply or use to create an incorrect answer choice. Now, this particular sentence has been mentioned in the context of making the clinical trials larger. But limiting information and checking the increasing risk of important variables being overlooked has been mentioned in the context of simplifying the clinical researches. Right? So this particular answer choice is not correct in the context of this particular sentence because the context has been changed altogether. Nothing has been said about restricting the study participation in the context of whether variables can be overlooked or not overlooked. That comes for making the medical trials simpler, not larger, and hence choice D is not the correct answer. So if you want to make a point of that change in the context is one of the ways of making an incorrect answer choice. You can do so because this happens very often in RC. Okay. All right. I think I'll just... Okay, let's move on to our question number 3. We had back-to-back 2 inference questions on the same line, but this time the inference was little tricky. This time the author is asking us, what is the advantage of the current way of conducting studies? Now, we know from the context of the passage that FNM only presents suggestion to improve the present clinical trials. Then what could be the advantage of the clinical trials? So if we dig a little deep, we understand that again, that it's the same statement from the passage which has been mentioned in the context of FNM's proposal to make the clinical trials larger, right? Why the clinical trials should be made larger? So that so that more people can, so the clinical trials break away from this mode of involving only ideal conditions and they take more people into that, right? But the way clinical trials are done, because they involve only those patients who suffer from only that particular ailment and no other ailment, they need to analyze less data, right? But if they accept FNM's suggestion and make the clinical trial larger by incorporating all sorts of subjects in their clinical trials, then they will have to look into a lot more data than they are doing now. So that's the only advantage that we can infer about the current clinical trial. Okay, so that is going to be our answer for this question. We have presented a few workings as to how it is advantageous. You can take a look at that when you look at the PDF. Let me bring in the poll for this question here. And I don't need to say anything. 63% of you did go with choice C. That means you did a great job in understanding the passage and making this correct inference, because this was really subtle and you could only do it if you really paid attention to that part of the sentence. So I must say Harsha's done a great job, and you guys have also learned every teaching here very, very nicely. And you've not only learned it, but you've applied it also very effectively, which is one of the most important aspects of learning. It's not about learning a principle. It's about learning to apply that principle in the right way. So great job, guys. Okay, with this, let's move on to question number 4. Our next question, why not option D? This sentence should be looked only for second paragraph. Yes, absolutely. And not because that particular statement appears in the second paragraph. So you need to focus only on the second paragraph, not the first paragraph, because the context of both the paragraphs are very, very different. Okay. Okay. Choice D. It would help researchers to identify subgroups of patients with secondary conditions that also be. This has not been mentioned as an advantage of the current clinical trial. This will happen only if FNM's proposal is accepted. You did not understand either the question or you did not understand the answer choice. What is choice D saying? Choice D will happen if FNM's proposal is accepted. It is not an advantage of the current clinical trial. That's the reason why choice D is incorrect. Okay. All right. Moving on to question number 4. So next, whenever we have something like this, the author mentions something primarily in order to, we know it's a function question or a purpose question. That means the question is asking us to mention the specific reason or the specific purpose why that particular word or a phrase or a sentence has been used in the passage. So that is exactly what we are going to do. Patients' ages may also affect a treatment's efficacy. Now, if we do a little pre-thinking over here, we understand that this is the last statement in our passage, and this has been said in the context of making the trials larger. What will happen if we make the trials larger? The results will be more representative. That's our first advantage. The second advantage would be that the efficacy of a treatment can be evaluated for a variety of patients' subgroup, and patients' age constitutes one of such age group. All right. So basically, this point has been mentioned in the passage to show that what FNM is proposing is actually right. I mean, it has its benefit related to that. Okay. So whatever would be the answer choice would be the correct answer, and choice D is the correct answer. While you go through the answer choices, I will bring up the poll, and once again, clean sweep with the correct answer choice, 63%. That's what we saw with choice C also. So question number 3 and question number 4, extremely good performance. You guys did really, really well with this one. I'll quickly talk about choice C over here. Indicate why progressive diseases may require different treatments at different stages. This is a different example. Why are we saying different example? Because this has got nothing to do with patients' ages. Mind you, this sentence is only talking about the subgroup involving different ages of the patient, not patients having progressive diseases. Okay, so choice C says nothing about the age of the patient. It talks about the progressive disease and a particular stage they may be at. Okay, it's got nothing to do with the age. So that's the problem with choice C. Why not choice E? Substantiate an argument about the problems inherent in large numbers of patients in clinical trial. substantiate an argument. What does this mean? To support an argument about the problems that are associated with enrolling large number of clinical trials. This is not why this paragraph, this sentence has been mentioned. It's totally opposite. In fact, the last sentence talks about a positive of FNM's suggestion. This will be the positive outcome of FNM suggestion, not the problem if you enroll more number of people. That's not a problem. That's actually a plus point, a positive. So choice E is absolutely opposite. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes. So with this, we come to the very last question, the trickiest of all that we got in this one, right? According to the passage, which of the following describes a result of the way in which researchers generally conduct clinical trial? In simple words, we need to find out cause and effect. What is that cause and effect that has been mentioned in the passage? It's a global question. There's no point of pre-thinking over here. I mean, we can do that. In the first paragraph, we know that it says that, okay, because clinical trials are done in this way, they take so much data, the result is that the cost is very high. Then the second paragraph, broadly, we can say that clinical trials, the way they they do the clinical trials, the samples are, the results are not very representative. So their application is also very limited, and that's why the need for suggestion to enroll more patients come in from FNM. Okay, so these are the cause and effect. That's what we are looking for, the cause and effect mentioned in the passage. With this understanding, when we move on to our answer choices, which do become tricky, choice A is the correct answer. And let me bring in the poll to see how we've done in this one. So you see, as we always predict, choice C has gotten more votes than choice A. And I will also talk about, let's first talk about choice A. Why is it correct? It says they expend resources, that means they spend money on the storage of information likely to be irrelevant to the study they are conducting. Yes, this is right. Now, many of the students reject choice A because the argument is, the first paragraph is talking about cost related to three aspects: collection, storage, and analysis. But this part is only talking about storage. Yes, it is true that the passage says that costs for A goes up, the costs for B goes up, and the cost for C goes up. But if the author chooses to say in one of the answer choices that, hey, the cost for B goes up, is that wrong? No. Of course, the author is not talking about the two aspects, but he doesn't say that the cost for only storage goes up, only the cost for storage goes up. He's not saying that. He's just saying that, hey, cost for storage of information is likely to be irrelevant to the study they are conducting. Right? So that's the cause and effect, that because they are collecting so much of data, they end up spending a lot of money in the storage of the information. So you don't need the mention of all the three aspects: collecting, storing, and analysis. Even saying that, yes, doing so increases the cost of storing is correct. Okay, so that's why choice A is the correct answer. Let's take a look at choice C, which is very, very interesting. They avoid. What does the word avoid mean? They do away with, they neglect, they overlook. They overlook the risk, or they avoid the risk of overlooking variables that might affect their findings, even though doing so raises their research costs. Well, I mean, here it could be related, but not, the passage does not say the second part very, very clearly. However, what our passage says very, very clearly is that let's take a look at this part in the passage. Never entirely eliminable from research. The passage clearly says this part, that this risk of overlooking a particular variable for a particular research work is never entirely eliminable from research. Okay, so that's first part of it. That's the first part of it, that avoid the risk of overlooking. That is definitely not that is not possible. That doesn't happen. Another thing to understand is that, let's go back to our question. What is the question asking? Describe a result of the way in which researchers generally conduct clinical trials. This part, that you will be able to overlook variables or you will not run into the risk of overlooking the variable, has not been presented as an effect of any cause. Okay, so it is very, very important to keep the context of the question in mind. Remember, when we simplified the question, that's what we said. We are going to look at the cause and effect. So this part of the sentence, that the risk of overlooking a variable is never entirely eliminable, is not the effect of doing the clinical trials. It is an argument to substantiate FNM's suggestion that, hey, you can still do with making the clinical trials simpler. Don't collect so much data. And this sentence comes as a defense or as a point to support FNM's suggestion, not as a cause and effect. That's another point to keep in mind. Okay, so that's why choice C is incorrect. And with this, I'm done with my part here. Thank you very much for being so patient. I know we are way over time in this session, but a little bit more. Rajat, I see you're here, so the mic is all yours. Please go ahead, and thank you guys. Thank you for being so patient.
All right, thank you, Shraddha. That was very helpful. Let me just remove the poll over here. Before I go on to the next part, I'm sure some of you have questions. Let me just clear all answers. So far, this, we're going to talk about how do you improve and become an RC champ, but any more doubts on this particular question? Let's do that, and then I'm going to move forward very quickly. I'm going to address some of the concerns that you have. And I'm going to just reduce the size of the presentation at my end. Can I explain? Option D. Yeah, option D says, because they attempt to analyze too much information, they overlook facts that could emerge as relevant. Where in the passage do you see the word that they overlook facts, by the way? And then the cause and effect, is that cause and effect ever relevant over there? Let me just bring the passage back up to you, and I'm going to really talk about, this is the passage. Can everyone see the passage? Quite simply, yes or no? Yes, everyone can see the passage. Okay, so okay, irrelevant is a strong term. I think that's one of the things you have to understand what irrelevant means. When you look at the word, currently researchers collect far more information on patients than is strictly required for their trials. What does this part mean? If you spend far more money on clothes than is strictly required, what does that mean? If you spend far more money on something than is strictly required, what are you doing? More than necessary. But what does that mean? Aren't you wasting money? Yes. If they collect far more data or background information on patients than is strictly required, then it's irrelevant information that's not relevant to the goal that they're trying to achieve. Okay. So again, that's one of those things that actually, this is a great question, because it's going to play right into what we want to do, which is, what is it that you need to be able to ace GMAT RC. Okay. They may be getting, if it's repetitive information, then is it more information? For someone who said it's repetitive information, is repetitive information more information? If you say yes 5 times, are you giving me any more information? No. So repetitive information is not more information. Okay. So coming back to this, and this is really important because acing GMAT RC and the kind of mistake you've made on this particular question, that's very, very reflective of the kind of mistakes you make when you get to that 75th, 80th percentile. So we're going to talk about what does it take to go from, many of you probably at a 30th or 40th percentile today. Remember, percentile is a comparative metric. So how do you go from that 30th to that 70th, 80th percentile, and then when it comes to that, going from that 70th, 80th to that 90th percentile or 97th percentile, that's where these things actually come in. Now, when it comes to acing GMAT RC, these are the two things that you have to do, which is read with that intent to understand everything about the passage, and essentially, which means you've got to really tell yourself, hey, this is something that I can't avoid. I've got to get to my score of 740, 750, 760. I've got to achieve that 90th percentile. Why is that important? Why is that attitude of achieving 90th percentile important? What happens when you're studying GMAT RC? At the back of your mind, there's something that's telling you, hey, I'm not as great at GMAT RC. At the back of your mind, there's something that's telling you, maybe I should focus my energy on something else. Does that happen with anyone else? Anyone over here to say, okay, maybe SC is going to be better. Maybe quant is going to help me. Let me accept that I'm not so great at it. Short answer poll. Honest answer. Does that happen? Yes. You guess, yes. I mean, if you're not there, if you actually give up on things, then that happens. And the reason why we give up on things is because we don't have that attitude that we need to achieve that 90th percentile. That's something that's required if I want to get to Harvard, if I want to get to Kellogg, if I want to get to Ross or whatever your dream school is. I think when you link it to that end goal, it becomes really important. Now, to get to that 90th percentile, other than reading with intent, you've got to do these things over here, where you've got to draw inferences while reading, and to draw inferences while reading, you have to break down big sentences. So this item number 1 in many ways is a cause and is a cause, which is, when you do this, action and effect in this case. This is again action, which is focusing on keywords, and this is your effect. And this overall, the summarizing piece leads to enhance comprehension. And these 3 things are important, but you're not going to just get these things right away. So you're not going to wake up tomorrow or later on when you read something, you're going to really say, hey, this is going to automatically start happening. No, there is a certain skill buildup that needs to happen. Okay. We've talked about this as to why you should do this. Now, to get to that 90th percentile, you've got to do 2 things. One is focus on mastering the method. We talked about the method on those 3 bullet points. And then the second thing is, even when you do that, you're going to get to that 80th percentile. And there will be some weaknesses that would remain. And that's where data comes in to help you improve the 90th or 95th percentile. So I'm going to focus a whole lot more on this, because for me to focus on data, you need to practice on our platform. Okay. But the first thing, I think, let's talk about the elephant in the room. How many of you are worried about timing and you're saying, hey, what Shraddha and Harsha talked about, it seems it takes a lot of time. As they went really slowly, they went really deep, and it seems that doing that would mean that I read slowly, and that would take a lot longer than what I think it would be. Okay. Really worrying. Okay. Okay, very good. That's something which is there. Good. The clock plays on the mind all the time. All right. Anyone who's a runner over here? Anyone does competitive running in this group? Marathon. Okay, marathons are good, but anyone runs 100 meters or 300 meters? I'm not a runner, but in general, I'm into sports. Okay, good. If you have to run fast, you know, if you have to run fast, what is the one thing that you need to do to increase your pace from what it currently is? What is the one thing if you were to do? Okay, what does working on it mean? Okay, start slow. The person who said longer steps, that's actually the key. Remember this, a human body can only move that fast. You can only rotate your legs that much fast. What you can really improve on is your stride length. Okay, and that's true for humans. That's true for all the animals. What's the fastest animal on Earth? The cheetah is the fastest animal on Earth. Why is the cheetah the fastest animal on Earth? What makes a cheetah the fastest animal? I mean, what attribute of a cheetah makes that animal, or a leopard for that matter? What attribute makes it? The longest stride length. Okay. What is that long stride length an outcome of? The feet structure as well as the strength in the legs. GMAT RC is something which is very, very similar. Reducing time on passage is an outcome of not reading quickly, but it's an outcome of improving comprehension, reading sentences better. Okay, that's kind of the equivalent of your increasing stride length. Let me just share some data with regards to this. So when you look at data over here, okay, this is when you go what we call as a slow reading speed, which is what slow reading of RC passage. This is how you're going to go through an RC passage. For most passages which are not very complex, this is in the exam environment. Once you've practiced reading strategies, you're going to take about 3 minutes to read the passage. An RC passage is about, the average RC passage is about 330 words. 3 minutes to read a passage is about 110 words a minute. Okay. Because you've improved comprehension, the time that you need to answer questions is going to be about a minute per question. So overall, about 7 minutes per passage. Does 7 minutes per passage when you're answering 4 questions, does that sound good? Does it sound good? Yes, it does. Okay. If for more difficult and for longer passages on GMAT RC are about 430 words. You'd probably need about 4 minutes to read the passage, and that's okay. Okay, because if you're comprehending the passage, you would know that you'd be able to answer questions. By the way, those difficult passages usually have easier questions if you understand the passage. They don't have questions which are very similar to question number 5 that we did in the passage with Shraddha. So you're going to take, because you're done with the passage, you're going to be able to answer questions more easily. Why? Because you'll not need to go back and refer to the passage that often. Okay. Again, you'd be done with this in between 7 to 8 minutes or so. Okay. So the slow initial reading is actually really good when it comes to time, as long as you learn how to comprehend the passage. Now, here is the speed reading technique. How many of you have gone to webinars where people really talk about and say, hey, focus on reading the first line with greater intent, rush through the middle of the passage, maybe focus on reading the last line? How many of you have attended those webinars? Yes, no, you have. Some, I'm sure many of you have. Okay. Those things don't work. And I can go and say on record, those things don't work. The evidence is what you saw in this. Try applying those strategies on the examples that we had in this webinar. It's not going to work. Okay. Some people really just say focus on subject and verb. Don't focus on the additional information. No, every modifier is there in GMAT RC because it has a purpose. You can't ignore those. Okay. By the way, just as a stat, when you look at us versus GMAT, other partners on GMAT Lab, we were about 10 times in 2021. 10 times, not 10%, but 10 times as many 700 plus scores as the average GMAT Club partner has. Okay, so that's the impact of the strategies that we recommend. And you can go do the math and because the data is out there. Okay, the problem with speed reading is you kind of end up reading the passage in about 2 minutes, but because you've not done your comprehension, while answering questions, you go back to the passage again and again. You actually, while reading the question, you have little clue as to what the answer will be or where the answer will be. Anyone who does speed reading and has faced this, you skimmed through the passage, read the question, and found out, man, I've got to really figure out where this answer is, or I have no idea, so let me read the passage again. You don't want to be in that situation. What's the point of skimming if you have to be in that situation? When you do that, it leads to increasing, your worry increases,